Hi everybody, Adrian Plass here again.
Yes, and Bridget again.
Here for the 16th Friday in a row, which means that if you call 4 weeks a month,
Yeah.
that's 4 months since our first one,
Yeah.
which was also the week in which things started to relax and people started to go out.
Yeah, because if you remember, we called it Sound in the Shallows because we thought we were in the shallows and it wasn't going to be too long till we got to the shore. And of course, we all know now that we knew nothing and that it still stretches ahead of us into an unknown future.
Well,
And we were talking
absolutely,
about unknown
yeah.
futures last week, weren't we? We were talking about eternity. And I don't know if you remember, but Adrian and I discovered we had quite a different view, really. I mean, you find infinity
No,
comforting, I think is the
I
word
should
you
miss
said.
get this straight.
Okay.
I don't particularly find infinity. What I find comforting is the sky at night, because there is infinity in, they say, the universe is infinite. And I just love the fact that there it is. There is an infinity there, and we talk about infinity with God and all that stuff. So it's that that really appeals to me.
Yeah. Well, I tune into some of that, but I still think that for me, just that very idea of something that goes on and on and on and on and on with no end, I find quite frightening. And the interesting thing is that we've had responses from both sides of that
We
argument,
have
haven't we?
indeed,
I
yeah,
mean,
we have.
here, definitely some people would agree with you. And somebody wrote something quite lovely, really, about eternity. It's quite long. I wouldn't call it a poem exactly, but a very creative, fluid way of thinking. And I'll just read you a little bit of what she said. She said, "Eternity is free of endless demands. It doesn't exert a need for compliance and control. It's a beautiful, endless tune of unforced natural harmony, holds no chaos, scary form or otherwise. It's not a place of faulty ideas, not an escapism. Eternity for those who've found love is not a place to fear you can't escape it, and not a place to fear the staying put, or worry that they will miss the correct escape exit. No, eternity isn't frightening." Quite a strong statement, but
Well,
it
it is, but
certainly isn't.
by contrast, there have been people who talked about how they found the whole idea very difficult, and one person was talking about how when he was young, he was told that if you want to understand eternity, if you imagine a snail, right, takes a grain of sand to the furthest planet away in the universe, and then comes back for the second grain of sand and takes that one.
Yes.
By the time he has taken every grain of sand to that planet, infinity would have only just begun. I did a similar thing about a sparrow
You
last
did,
week.
and that doesn't allay my fears at all, Adrian,
I
any
appreciate
more
that.
than it did his.
But that doesn't appeal to me as a as a concept. Somebody also referenced Henri Nouwen, who actually makes the same point as me and Henri Nouwen. So he talks about the fact that there are some experiences that are kind of mountaintop experiences.
Yes, yeah.
Birth of a child,
Yeah.
death of a friend, because of what the feelings it evokes, but where you don't think about time, you're just in it,
Yes.
and that's it.
Yeah. And we did talk a bit about that as well last week, didn't we? Those moments where everything stops
Yeah.
and you don't want them to end. And we also talked about what it would be like to arrive at the gates of heaven facing eternity. What might that be like?
Well, it might be a bit like this. Morning.
Good morning. Can I help you?
Well, I'm not quite sure. I just got run over by a bus.
Oh, yes.
And I've ended up here.
Uh-huh.
So I wanted to ask you: Is this heaven?
Outer hall office, yes, it is indeed, sir.
Oh, right, right. You look very human. I thought there'd be an angel on the desk.
Well, there usually is, sir, but he's off sick.
Oh, do angels get sick?
Foul pest, I'm afraid.
Ah, right. Well, what I wanted to know is, am I going to? I don't know how to say it. Am I going to get in? Can I just tell you, I'm a writer. Actually, I am a Christian writer.
Oh, no, you don't need to necessarily worry. I mean, Christian writers have occasionally made it into heaven. Can you just give me your name?
Oh, well, I'm I'm Adrian Plass.
Oh, dear.
Oh, what do you mean, oh dear? Was there something wrong with the things I wrote?
Well, I think I've got your file here. Let's have a look. Oh, my goodness.
What's the problem? What's the problem?
Oh, well, it's not at all good, I'm afraid. You see, your comments about other denominations, for instance, I mean, they're really rather flippant and silly. You say in one book, and I quote, "Baptist churches make me a bit nervous. You always feel there's something going on under the surface."
Yeah, well, that was just a joke.
Yes.
But anyway, I didn't really mean to ever
well,
upset
and then
anybody.
there's the URC. And you report that in a fictional interdenominational football tournament, the URC team was disqualified for dangerous and illegal use of Zimmer frames. I presume that's another joke, Mr. Plass.
Of course, but I never meant
And
to
how
upset
about this then? How about this then?
Oh, dear.
The charismatic team would have done a lot better if they hadn't played with their arms in the air and their eyes closed. They were also penalised twice, once for moving the goal posts and once for marching round the edge of the pitch, claiming victory for the Lord.
Yes, I know, but just hold on a minute. I mean, I did write those things, but I said some good things as well. I mean, I'm sure I remember writing somewhere that a lot of Methodists that I know are pillars of the church.
Oh, yes, you did say that, but you also said, Mr. Plass, that pillars of the church are big, thick things that hold everything up and obscure vision.
Look, I said things about Anglicans as well, and I am an Anglican.
Yes, I know. Actually, you're in luck there.
Oh, am I?
Yes. The Bible says that Anglicans will be in heaven before anyone else.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yes. It says quite clearly that the dead will rise first.
Ah, excellent.
That was a joke. You like jokes, don't you, Mr. Plass?
Look, this is getting a bit worrying. Look, seriously, please tell me, taking everything into consideration, all that stuff and everything else, am I going to get into heaven?
Okay, I'll take a look for you. Computer says no.
Is that true?
No, it's a joke. Hold on. Text from Jesus. Says he knows you. You're in.
Oh, well, thank God for that.
Yeah. It's not what you do. It's who you know. And there, in a way, lies a bit of a wobble at the moment, doesn't it, Adrian? The getting to heaven. I mean, you once heard somebody say quite frightening things about getting to heaven, didn't you?
Yeah, I think when people are very definite and very sure, it's quite disturbing. I remember this fellow, I was sitting on the platform at the time behind him, and he walked out to the front and he was very dramatic, and he said, "When you arrive at the gates of heaven and God is there, what will you say?" And of course all the 1,000 people or whatever were there all cringed, thinking, I don't know what I'd say. I'll say squirrel. I don't know. And then he went through all the technical stuff you should say. And then, after he'd gone through all the things you need to say, he said, "If you did not answer my question in that way when I asked it, you are probably not saved."
Oh, my goodness.
And all those people went off to their B&Bs in the town where the conference was, all thinking, I thought I was saved, but I'm not. I find it really difficult to have lines drawn quite so specifically. I don't like that.
And
very
don't you
much.
think some of those questions are actually what people are asking themselves at the moment? Because
Sure they
they're
are.
not so sure they do know Jesus, or rather they're not so sure that he knows them. It's all we've lost. We've lost communal praise, we've lost gathering together, we've lost the things that Jesus wanted for us. He wanted people to get together and be together, didn't he? Because he knew, I'm sure, how difficult it is when you're on your own to hang on to the things that are important, really.
Absolutely. And communication is always important. And we spent 30 years, haven't we, trying to communicate, and it's not that easy. In fact, all through history, people have really battled to communicate. It's very interesting when you look into that. And, of course, you can Google everything now. But people used things like beacons in Napoleonic times to send messages right across the country.
They were very clear, weren't they? They were on the hills, weren't they? They lit a fire and then lit the next one.
That's right. Yeah, all sorts of devices and ideas that made it possible to communicate.
And usually it was a warning, wasn't it? Like the sirens in the war, and it would be immediately recognised for what it was.
Yeah.
Do you remember? And this is going back a bit. Only I was thinking about it, and so I've just checked my facts a tiny bit because it was quite complex, really. But do you remember when we were in Bangladesh and we went to Chittagong?
I remember it very, very well, and I know exactly what you're going to talk about.
It was called the Cyclone Rescue Centre.
Cyclone Rescue Centre,
yes.
yeah.
And what that was all to do with all the cyclones that poor little area get. In fact, I gathered, looking at my notes, that over 180 years, there were 200 cyclones. 50 million people died, which rather puts into perspective one little area of the world so affected by these cyclones. And World Vision, that's who we were with, and they came up with an idea, and we went to look at one of their ideas, which was, if you remember, an incredibly high tower made of concrete with a point, like an arrow point.
That's right. Yeah.
And
pointing towards the sea.
Pointing towards the sea. The idea of it was that when the cyclone came, when the twister came, and this incredible hurl of wind, it would reach this point because it was pointing to the eye of the storm and would be split in two.
That's right.
And so the whole force of the wind was dissipated. But what, if you remember, we were completely fascinated by was the numbers that were round this building. It was very high up, and all the tiny villagers would be able to see it. And the numbers went from 1 to 10. So 1 meant that if there was one blast of the siren, it meant that it was possible within the next 24 hours. And then 5 would mean that it was unwise to leave your village. And I think we were both very struck by number 6. When it went 6 times, it meant dig a hole, a deep hole, and bury your rice, your dry rice. Because if you manage to get back to your village afterwards, you'll need to eat. And then number 7 was leave everything and bring your animals with you. And it really had saved. There has not been one death. There's been devastation in the area. But there was a warning because it was urgent and it was what people needed.
And they were all crunched inside behind that wall, weren't they?
They were.
And well, obviously we didn't see that. But when you were standing on top of it, it was very easy to imagine the panic with which people poured into that space and hoped against hope that it would survive this terrible blast that was going to hit.
I was thinking, because we're still in a boat, we are still in boats, aren't we? And I was thinking about boat communication. And I looked it up, Adrian. I've done a couple of looking ups. This one wasn't quite as exciting as Chittagong.
Right.
Apparently, sailors on small boats will often wave to each other like motorcyclists because they have something in common. I found that, I'm in a boat. You're in a boat. Hi, we're both in boats.
I'm sure you get a number of boat people writing in very indignant letters to you. Although this happens a lot, doesn't it? On the road, for instance, people wave to each other if they're in the same sort of car.
Yes.
And when we were in Queensland once in Australia...
No, we were not in Queensland. That's the whole
no,
point.
that's true. We were not in Queensland. We were somewhere else.
We were in New
South
Wales.
From behind us, a voice said, "Queensland!" Because the number plate of our car that we'd rented indicated that it came from Queensland. That voice just sort of hit. We knew Queensland. Probably a very bad Queensland accent, but yeah, that identification is very important.
And it was
to
so
people.
lovely and familiar to hear it, actually, wasn't
yeah,
it? We didn't try and
was.
explain that actually it was a rented car or anything else, but at least there was that sense of togetherness in it. I was interested in the rules of the boat communication in terms of using the radio, though.
Yeah.
There is actually regulations that prohibit frivolous use. And in this thing I was looking up, it said prohibit frivolous use such as Contessa with the blue hull, I like the cut of your jib.
Is that a quote?
I think a few other boat
was
people
that an actual,
might be.
actual
Yes,
quote in the regulations?
absolutely,
Oh.
absolutely.
Yeah. So if I'm walking down the road and I say, Contessa with the blue hull, I like the cut of your jib.
Well, I hope you will be told what to do
Where
with
to go,
yourself, really.
yeah.
But it is true, isn't it, that communication is still
Well,
urgent.
I
at the
saw this
moment.
recently. I had to go into the hospital for a test, and I was there for 5 hours.
They were just eye
actually.
tests that turned
Eye
out to
tests,
be
yeah.
okay, didn't they?
Yeah, but it was very difficult for people because you're not allowed to bring your friend or your relative with you, or the other way around. And so communication is very difficult. And I ended up sitting in a room with a gentleman on my left on a chair and a lady on the chair on the right, because they kept coming after me. They obviously belonged together, and I think they were husband and wife. Don't know how she managed to get in, but there she was. And he was very cross. And he was saying, no, don't need, no. And she was looking over her mask, trying to speak with her eyes, and looking like an owl over her mask, and saying and waving papers at him. And they were in a terrible state, and they were 10 feet apart.
Yes.
Plus the fact that I was in the middle of them,
Yes.
and therefore they couldn't sort of hush their voices and do it in a different way. And then later, after I'd been there for 2/3 of this endless time, I talk about infinity. I don't know, but I come out of one of my tests, and there was a lady sitting about, I don't know, 6 or 7 feet away from me,
Yeah.
and she looked quite troubled. And I turned to her and did what I thought was my normal reassuring smile. And of course, I suddenly realized that it wasn't visible because I was wearing a blinking mask.
Yes.
And what I was actually doing was staring at her.
Yes.
So I then had to use my voice
Yeah.
to offer a smile to her and some reassurance. But it's really, really difficult at the moment.
But it's urgent, isn't it, that we break barriers? And that's going to take a bit more courage, because we can't just smile. We're going to have to talk to people. And somehow I think we're going to have to find a way to be more welcoming, even though welcome is so complicated. Warmer than ever, even though we can't hug people. And I think we're going to have to learn even more about how to listen, because we're not going to be able to rely on our experience or our training or anything. It might be totally irrelevant, because increasingly, you know, at the beginning, if you remember, we said we're all in the same boat. Well, increasingly we're in different boats, and people are having different experiences. Some people are frustrated, some people are angry, some people are depressed, some people are just enjoying what they're doing now. There isn't a one-for-all fit anymore. And what someone needs, they need urgently.
That's right, yeah. Here's someone who really needed something urgently because he'd left it on a train. And he's come into inquiries. Good morning. Can you tell me which train I get to Flaxton?
Okay. Which train do you want to get to Flaxton?
What? One that goes there, of course. Look, please, soon. What are you talking about? Do you think I want a Flaxton train that doesn't go to Flaxton? Are you stupid or something?
Thank you for sharing your anger with me.
Look, I'll be sharing something else with you in a minute if you don't tell me where I can get a train to...
Yes, can I ask you something?
You want to ask me something?
I do. Do I remind you of your mother?
No, you do not remind me of my mother. My mother was sane and helpful. Look, it's very simple, really. I've left my case on the Flaxton train. I've got to get it back in time to get to Derby because I've got a very important engagement there. And here I am, stuck with some kind of redundant social worker.
shall we just unpack this?
I'd love to unpack it, you dozy git. It's on the way to Flaxton.
Okay. Humour's always good.
Look, never mind humour, never mind anything else. Just tell me which train I get to Flaxton, and tell me now.
May I tell you what I'm hearing you say?
Oh, dear me. That may be a slight exaggeration, but I have had conversations like that.
Yeah, and somebody thinks that they're bringing their expertise into something and they're not really listening.
Yeah, that's right. I was remembering, not exactly a conversation, but a moment at school when I was in secondary school, and life at home was very turbulent, and I hadn't done my homework. And the English teacher, who was a really nice man, said to me, "Now, you haven't done your homework." In all my career as a teacher, he said, "I've never put a boy in detention, but I'm going to do that with you now."
And you still remember it, don't you?
Well, thing is, I stood there thinking, I have no words to tell him how impossible it is to do my homework. And you have added pain into my pain because you don't understand that. And it was an impossible moment of miscommunication. Yes, I've always remembered that.
And everyone has a different story from this period, don't they? And for some people there is a real scream. Listen to me. Don't tell me what you think. Don't tell me that God is underneath it all if for me he isn't. Don't tell me that it's going to finish if you don't know that it is. It's a case of really listening.
Yeah.
Behind our blinking masks, listening in a way maybe we've never done before.
And Jesus did. Jesus always listened, always told stories and asked questions to get to the middle of where people are. And we really need to do that. Need to pray carefully.
And maybe this week we need to ask God for the right question when we're with people. Not for the right answer, but for the right question, so people really can tell us what they're feeling and where they're coming from.
Yeah. Let's hope this next, possibly very difficult week,
we
get through okay.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next time.
Yes, we will.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.